My name is Trisha Wilging. I'm from Long Beach City College. I am the SLO coordinator, and I began my tenure as the SLO coordinator, if you will, in March of 2020, about 3 weeks before we went home for the pandemic. And so my experience may be similar to some of yours or different from some of yours, but I'd just like to share kind of where we were and how we got to where we are now, and to share some of the processes that we instituted along the way to help us to close the loop. So that's what my presentation is about today, closing the loop, and using course, program, and institutional student learning outcomes results to take very intentional actions. And then also, I just wanted to mention that I don't do a very good job of monitoring the chat while I'm presenting, but if you have a question, I would happily answer it midstream. You'll just need to wave your hand or turn your video on and wave at me or something so that I can recognize that somebody has a question. And with that said, I'll get started. Okay, so at LBCC, when I began, we had a real need for inquiry. This shows that in the 2018-2019 year before I started as the coordinator, we had only 14% of our SLOs, our course SLOs at the institution, that even had results of assessment reported. And you'll see a little bit later on in the presentation, the kind of results that were reported were maybe not that clear or even that helpful. We only had 3% of our course SLOs closing the loop, 9% of our program SLOs, and none of our institutional SLOs. And so there was a real need for inquiry. And there was a real feeling, probably as though you all have faced, there was a real feeling that SLOs were a compliance issue. And it was just something that we had to do. And while that's not completely untrue, we do need to assess our SLOs and analyze those results and take action to improve student learning in order to satisfy our accreditors. But we also realize that student learning is the capital of our institutions, and really our students need to do the learning in order to make progress, whether that's at a community college to transfer at a 4-year to go on to further education or even to enter into the workforce. So we could approach SLOs as a box checking exercise to meet our accreditors' expectations, but we can also reframe it and focus on inquiry as a way to have rich dialogue and meaningful conversations about student learning and help to move the needle with student learning, both from an overall perspective and even to meet some of our equity goals. And so one thing we did is that we also simplified and made clear our student learning outcomes cycles. And so for the most part, our course, program, and institutional cycles are on a 2-year cycle, where 1 year our real focus is on assessment. And then next year, our focus is, while we continue to assess, we also focus on analysis and action of those results. With program SLOs, our CTE cycle, our CTE programs follow that 2-year cycle because of California Ed Code, but our non-CTE courses follow a 3-year cycle because it allows our faculty to gather more results over time and then maybe to see trends a little bit more clearly and take actions that are representative of those trends. So we recognize the need for inquiry, and we simplified our cycle so that even though it maybe changed things from a workload perspective, it brought everybody at the institution onto the same page. And so everybody knew what was expected of them at every time. And also, because of the pandemic, maybe it was a blessing in disguise, but we were able to work to move all of our assessments onto Canvas. And so one thing we did in order to help that to happen is we created these SLO workbooks. These were department level workbooks, and they were created with the support of our Office of Institutional Effectiveness, who ran reports to let us know which courses on the campus had assessments built into our Canvas structure and which courses did not. and even not just courses, but even at the SLO level. So for example, you can see this Education 20 course here. We see that Education 20 SLO1 did have an assessment and SLO2 did have an assessment, but our Read 83 course, SLO1 did not and SLO2 did not. So it gave the departments a very clear indicator of where they needed to go with their labor and their efforts. Okay, so that's one thing. Then second of all, we worked to build out a Canvas SLO structure. Then this Canvas SLO structure was very important because the way we set it up helped us to be able to pull our results of assessment out of Canvas in a very clear way, so that we could put it into our Tableau data visualization software. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you what those results of assessment look like in Tableau. We created a Canvas SLO structure in a way where every semester, every course has a specific SLO shell. And we did this because it enables us to pull the data into Tableau much more cleanly. It does involve one extra step on the part of faculty to score the SLO assessments within Canvas if they're using a rubric, or to direct their students to take their assessment on Canvas if it's a quiz-based rubric or a quiz-based assessment. And so by virtue of doing this, even though it created one small step in addition for faculty, my experience has been that once faculty learned, it hasn't been too troublesome or problematic. And by virtue of doing it this way, not only can we pull the data, but every SLO assessment, so say for an English 1 course, every English 1 faculty member scores the same assessment. It's broken down into various categories so that when faculty are looking at the results, they can see very specifically where the areas of strength and weakness lie. And this happens for the quizzes that students take and the rubrics that faculty score. In the actual Canvas shells or on the Canvas dashboard, every student and faculty member will see a tile, and it's very specific to the course and to the semester. And so as long as it's there, students and faculty can click on it. The student view looks a little bit like this, where there's a message about what is a student learning outcome, how do you carry it out or take it on. And then there's this button here at the bottom that students can click on, and it'll take them to the modules, which is where those assessments lie. They all have a very specific naming convention, which helps us to pull it again from Canvas, the back end of Canvas, into Tableau. And it is very clear what students need to do. Faculty have a few more links here on the left side of Canvas, and those links are things like grades, so faculty can see students' scores, and or in this Read course, both of the assessments are quizzes, so students take the direct assessment. In some cases, faculty will use a rubric, and again, I'll show you an example of that as well. But a rubric might be, for a performance-based class where a student is giving a performance and the faculty member has to score that performance in various ways. And so in order to conduct that scoring, the faculty member would have to access the rubric. It's still a direct assessment, but it's a faculty perspective rather than a student taking a quiz. I did see one question in the chat, and it said, how do faculty feel about the consistency of assignments and rubrics? And my experience is they feel very good. It's very clear. They work together to design them. So there's a lot of faculty buy-in. And then once they're established, it just is what it is. And so faculty enter into the process, and then through that course SLO or program SLO cycle, when we get to the analysis and action phase, if faculty are struggling with a component of the rubric or with an aspect of the quiz, they have the opportunity to have that dialogue and to make any kind of necessary changes. And then related to the next few questions, maybe I will take those a little bit later. But it is applied to every class. So every course on campus and every student learning outcome needs to have an assessment in Canvas. And that's why we created those tracking sheets to help faculty in the departments know which areas need to have an assessment created and built. Okay, when we look at it inside of the shell, a quiz looks very much like a standard quiz, where students would read the question and click on the correct answer. And a rubric is just created in a way that depends on how the faculty create it. We do have what we call a robust assessment criteria, both for our quizzes and for our rubrics, in order to help faculty design assessments that will yield more instructionally meaningful results. And really what I mean by that is, if you just have a yes or no, students can comprehend text, right? Maybe in an English 1 course. If you have a yes or a no, it might give you an indicator of what percentage of our students can comprehend text by the time they leave our course, but it doesn't let us know where the areas of strength and weakness lie. So by virtue of having quiz questions broken out or rubric categories broken out, it yields a much more robust data set to allow faculty to have more intentional conversations about teaching and learning. Okay, then Tableau. So we have to set it up. We had to get it ourselves set up in Canvas in that way in order to be able to pull our results into Tableau. And again, it might not be the only way. There may be other ways. It does allow individual faculty to use the Canvas outcomes option and then just transfer their scores into the SLO shell. It allows faculty, let's say in a history course, one faculty member wants to use one assignment and one faculty member wants to use another assignment. The assignments utilized can be different as long as the results the results indicate the target criteria for meeting the student learning outcomes. So faculty like the flexibility because if it's a rubric, that is, and an essay, I can assign one prompt and you can assign another prompt, but still we can measure whether or not our students are meeting the learning outcomes. If it's a quiz, it's a little bit more rigid in that every student has to take the exact same quiz. But once students complete their assessments or faculty complete the scoring, we've begun to use Tableau, and it visualized the data for faculty, which opened the path to greater inquiry. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not a math person. And so when I get a set of scores in an Excel spreadsheet, it doesn't help me to know what to do very clearly. But when the data is visualized, I can see where the strengths are and where the weaknesses are. And I can have conversations with my colleagues that lend themselves to very intentional actions. We pair the Tableau dashboard with what we call our analysis and action guides. It's something that I worked with our Office of Institutional Effectiveness to create in order to help faculty to answer certain questions and to dig into the data in a little bit of a deeper way. And then we supported the Tableau work, the Canvas work, the analysis and action work with a lot of workshops and additional resources. Some of those resources look like course SLO analysis and actions workshops, PSLO mapping workshops so that we could align our course SLOs to our program SLOs, program SLO analysis and actions workshops. And then we also provided a lot of information on the website with examples. We gave the analysis and action guides, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. And we also provided lists of meaningful actions. So sometimes as faculty look at data and they realize that something needs to be done, they might not have a clear idea of what they could do. So the list of meaningful actions are wonderful because it just gives a launching point. It's by no means a be-all and end-all list, but it's a list that faculty at my campus collaborated to create. And so it just gives a launching point for discussion or an idea where to start. But before we get there, let's go ahead and look at our data visualization. So in a minute, I'm going to go show you the live Tableau version, but here are some screenshots. And you can see here on this side, there is a breakdown of the rubric scoring. And then here we even have equity filters. So it disaggregates the data for us and shows us where the strengths and weaknesses lie in an even deeper way. And then we have our analysis and action guides. So as faculty are navigating through the dashboards, they're able to answer these questions. And by virtue of answering these questions, they are led through analyzing the various aspects of the data from an overall perspective, comparing it to course success rates, looking at the disaggregated equity filters, and then determining actions that they might take in order to address the weaknesses that they saw or to leverage the strengths that they saw. And so I am going to go ahead and share my screen and show Tableau in action for course SLOs really quickly. But if there are questions, I won't read them through the chat right now, but if there are questions about something that I've shared so far and you'd like to ask, I'll just pause for a moment and take any of those questions. This Tableau link, the live link, isn't fully accessible to folks outside of our institution, but we do have a data mart link that I could share at the end that protects identities a little bit more and shows a little bit higher level views. But yes, I can share that link for sure. Beyond that, maybe I'll just jump in. So what I'd like to show you is how our dashboard looks. And we have wonderful folks in our Office of Institutional Effectiveness that have worked really hard to design this. And so you can see here, if in the course selection, folks can select any course at the entire institution that has results of assessment. And so as you can see, there are quite a few. We're going to stick with one course as an example that I had wanted to show you, which is our Fire 2 course. And we can break it down to hybrid, in person, or online, but we're going to keep it all together for the sake of this illustration. And also we're going to look at SLO 2. And so SLO 2 in this Fire 2 course says, identify and understand corrective measures for specific fire hazards. And so we can see that it looks like this is a this course is only offered one section per semester, or 1 to 2 sections, because it looks like the enrollment is a little higher, but not every student participates. We can see that our participation rate is 46%, which is something that we're working on as an institution. And the average SLO assessment score here is 70%, which meets our college's expected level of achievement. And also, this is a quiz-based assessment, which we can see here. And as we look at these scores, we can see where students did really well and where they struggled. So for example, in question 3, what part of the means of egress are occupants generally at greatest risk? If we hover over this, we can see not only what the correct answer was, but what the incorrect answers were and what the rate of choosing those answers are. Sometimes this helps us, or helps our faculty to understand, you know, where if a question was confusing, or if something was emphasized in class that may have led students astray, so on and so forth. And also it helps us to identify areas of strength. We can also disaggregate these results by race and ethnicity. So across the board here, we can see that with question number 3, all of our student groups struggled, but still, overarchingly, it seems like our Black African-American students actually outperformed our other groups of students. So it's an interesting piece of data to look at, and it gives our faculty an opportunity to have certain conversations about why the data looks the way that it looks and what maybe could be done to help address overall success or success for specific student groups. We can break it down by gender. as well, although it's not across, it's not an intersectional result. We can't do race and gender at once, at least not yet. And then we can also, if we look at the time frame here, we can also look at it semester by semester. So we can see in fall of 2020, our students across the board struggled more than any other term, which makes sense because everybody went home due to a pandemic, right? So that's an example of what it looks like in a quiz-based assessment. But I'd also like to show you a rubric-based assessment. And so I'm going to show you our Music 51A course, which is a course that is a piano performance course. And so again, we have our various terms. We see that 1 or 2 sections of the course are offered. We see our participation rate, but we also see that our average SLO score is pretty low. Granted, in fall of 2020, when everybody went home, the average assessment score was 37%. So it just gives faculty the opportunity to identify that, hey, there were these anomalies that may have contributed to this lower average assessment score. But that being said, we also can see, again, areas of strength and weakness. So when it comes to piano performance, with accuracy, repertoire, and tempo, our students were performing pretty well. But as far as getting the finger placements correct, they struggled a bit. And so it just gives some window and some insights into how students are doing and where the strengths and the weaknesses lie. So far, according to the question in the chat, faculty and programs have not really been concerned about the data being available across the institution, primarily because it's not just an individual instructor typically teaching one course. It's a number of instructors who are teaching those courses, and their results are all contributing together into the data in this dashboard. There is an option for faculty to see their personal individual results of assessment, but that option is only available to individual faculty. Nobody can access their personal results of assessment except for the faculty members themselves. And that was a request that came from faculty. Faculty said, hey, we want to see our own results of assessment because we want to know how we're doing in comparison to the rest. We want to know if there's something, I want to know if there's something in my own instruction, some bias that I'm unaware of, or some area of weakness in my pedagogy and my delivery of content. I want to know that so that I can render my students the greatest help. And so we haven't had too much pushback related to the availability of data across the campus. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now because I want to show you, as a result of these kinds of things, we also have the SLO workbooks that allow us to capture the analyses and the actions, which is very important, and I'll show you why in a moment. But this is the kind of data that we're getting in the kind of conversations that we're having that we didn't have before. So in 2018-19, our analysis and action looked like this. There was a 77%. That was the only information that we had. Whereas in 2020 and 21, after we began our work with the Tableau dashboards and the analysis and action guides, the faculty are having all of these conversations and providing such rich intentional action. So they're holding a workshop for 2 of the courses in order to align instruction and share activities. They're incorporating equity and inclusion on each syllabus and in each course. They're inviting counselors and professionals in the field to answer questions about the major. And they realized that within the assessment, one of the questions had a mistake. So they were able to edit and correct that, modify that a little bit, right? So they're capturing these very intentional actions that they're taking. In another course, for example, a lot of the emphasis was given to equity. They said more personal attention needs to be given to the Black students to help them stay involved in the class through the end of the semester. Attention to repertoire choices will be improved to better represent students in the course and to inspire and motivate students who are struggling to succeed. They wanted to feature more Black composers, women composers, and guest artists to engage their students. So these are very intentional actions, very specific actions taken to address the gaps that they saw in the data. And without seeing it visualized in that way, they might not have taken that kind of action. For the program SLO dashboard, we have it's similar to the course SLO dashboard, right? We have the data visualization, and we also have a program SLO analysis and action guide. And so if it's okay with you, I will go ahead and share the PSLO analysis or the Tableau dashboard for program student learning outcomes. And what I'd like to do with that is switch to our PSLO dashboard. So in our PSLO dashboard, we can show PSLO results or program student learning outcome results at the school level. Our deans like this feature because they can see how all the programs are doing in their own school. We can see it at the department level, so a department head or faculty within a department can see how all of the programs are doing. But we can even look at it at the program level to drill down to get very specific information about how our students are doing in their programs. And so I'm going to show you the language arts and communications area, and I'd like to show the comm studies, associate's degree for transfer in comm studies. So here you can see these are all 4 of our program student learning outcomes, and across the board in comm studies, our students are meeting the expected level of achievement. We can see that engaging in critical thinking isn't as strong as examining theories or communicating competently, but that's probably something we would expect because critical thinking is a higher level, more challenging skill. Here we can also, if we click on this button, we can see every single course that aligns to that program student learning outcome. So our faculty have mapped all of their course SLOs, both required core courses and elective courses, should they choose. It's completely up to them. They have the full authority to map what they feel they need to map in order to determine whether students are meeting the objectives of the program. So we can see all of the course SLOs that map, and we can see that, for example, here in English 3, the students are struggling. Again, this is the critical thinking component, right? And that maps to that second course SLO, Socio 1 as well. So we can see that level of data. We can also disaggregate. We can see again how students are doing by race and ethnicity. And in this case, we see that still, even though there are no large equity gaps, still across the board, our white students are performing at a higher rate than any of our other student groups. And so it's just, again, a good piece of data to have a conversation about, and to see if there are any kinds of intentional actions that could be taken to close that gap a little bit more. We can also disaggregate by those students who are taking the courses because it's required for their major, and those students who are taking it the courses even though it's not required for a major. So there are a lot of steps that we've been able to work out to show this. Sorry, I got distracted by the questions in the chat. Let's see. We don't at this point have a dashboard that shows student achievement for progression toward their program, although it might be something that could be developed. And how long did it take us to implement this at our institution? I would say that we are still in the learning process, but I have been the SLO coordinator for 3 years, and this work primarily began when I came on board. It's not that SLO work wasn't happening before, it was, but the pandemic in a certain sense was a blessing in disguise because every faculty member had to move into Canvas. And so as a result, the mystery and the fear related to Canvas dissipated significantly. And then when SLO assessments were built into Canvas, both faculty and students knew how to use them. And we were able to gather so much more data and be able to really see what is happening with our students. Okay, I'd like to show you a couple more things. Institutionally, we also, well, let me show you some of the comments that were made. In 2018 and 19, in this particular program, no analysis and action was taken whatsoever. But in 2020 and 21, all art history faculty have made efforts to demystify their syllabi, to make Canvas homepages more welcoming, to establish more clear communication plans with students. And we updated the recommended preparation to completion of or concurrent enrollment in English 1 to alert students and counselors to the reading and writing demands of the course. They utilize transparent assignments and culturally relevant examples to engage students. So across their program, they made these changes. And so those are huge curricular changes that may have initially had an impact on enrollment because it requires that English 1 designation, right? But it wouldn't be a large impact over time, and it may eventually lead to greater success in the courses because students will have the training and the support in reading and writing that they will need in order to successfully navigate the courses in the art history program. Okay, so institutional student learning outcomes. This was a big one. We had to have our faculty map our course SLOs to our institutional SLOs. Then we had to create a direct assessment. Faculty were assessing institutional SLOs in Canvas in the same way that they were scoring rubrics for course SLOs. We also had an ISLO analysis and action guide. And so what happened is that our faculty took care of scoring the assessment so that we could gather results. Our Office of Institutional Effectiveness built them into Tableau for us, and we created an analysis and action guide for ISLOs that our Assessment of Student Learning Outcomes subcommittee took care of. And that subcommittee represents faculty, classified staff, and managers, instructional deans, and other classified staff that work some with SLOs. So it was a larger group of folks who work together to analyze and act on our institutional student learning outcomes. And so before I go to that slide, I'd like to share the dashboard with you again. And so our ISLO dashboard, I'd just like to take an opportunity to show you ISLO 4, which is to critically and ethically engage in global and local issues with a sensitivity to the diversity of individuals, groups, and cultures. Again, very broad. In one semester, 1,400 students were scored through this rubric. And again, it's one semester because it took place in fall of 2020 and analysis and action had to take place in spring. So this year that we're in currently right now is our analysis and action year. So I'm really looking forward to having more results over time and seeing how the actions that we took 2 years ago have impacted the results. But something really neat to see here is the breakdown of how many students are scoring in what range. So some of our students are earning a 1, which means their ability to critically and ethically engage is just emerging. Some are scoring a 2, it's developing. Some are scoring a 3, meaning they're proficient. And some are scoring at that 4 range, meaning they're really excellently engaging critically and ethically in these global and local issues. We can disaggregate it by race, and we can see that there are well, we can see the kind of average assessment score. We can disaggregate it by gender. But what is really interesting and helpful about this dashboard is the matter of unit completion. So we've also added a filter to show how our students are doing over time at the institution. Our students who have completed 0 to 14 units are scoring a 2.8. Our students who've scored 30 units and who have completed 30 units and above are scoring in this 3.2 range, right? So it makes sense when the student is first engaging in the content at the institution, we don't expect them to be proficient or even excellent at meeting these institutional learning outcomes. We expect that they would be emerging in their understanding, developing in their understanding. But also then when we disaggregate it by race and ethnicity, we can see, oh, this also makes sense, right? our Black, African American, and Hispanic and Latino students are struggling more than the most. And so a lot of our actions lended themselves to figuring out how we could support our students in this as they're entering the institution, especially our students of color, so that they would be more successful, right? But also, one thing that's really encouraging to see is that over time in all of our groups, as students progress at the institution, our equity gaps are shrinking. So we were very encouraged to see that in our ISLO results and in this dashboard. Okay. So some of the actions we took, it was, again, the ASLO subcommittee. We made sure that we aligned our actions with the VPAA and VP Student Services, Academic Affairs and Student Services plans and their goals. And we also shared our actions with the Strategic Plan Oversight Task Force, so that it would inform the development of our 2022-2026 strategic plan. So it's layered and incorporated throughout the institution. It wasn't just something that one committee looked at one time and said, hey, these would be good ideas. No, it was woven. We really had the intention to weave it into the fabric of the institution so that these changes would be institutionalized, and hopefully we would see some growth and improvement in student learning. All of this worked to inform our program planning process in the following years. And so in 2018, 2020 and 21, 6% of our courses had analyzed results and 3% had taken actions. In 21 and 22, after our analysis and action year, 30% of our courses across the campus had analyzed results and had taken action. And again, the type of results or the type of analysis and action that they were talking about was very intentional, very aligned with the data. And so you can see that as a result of a move toward inquiry, really, we had made a lot of progress. Now, we did take a little dip in our results of assessment. And while I was discouraged, if I'm being honest, to see that, also we can see that more than I think there were over 260 more SLOs that had assessments built into Canvas. So still progress is being made. We're building the assessments into Canvas. Now the emphasis and the effort is going to, again, be to assess them and to increase those participation rates. We, like I said, increased our fully closing the loop on course SLOs, program SLOs, institutional SLOs. And I can't speak to last year yet because we were in just the assessment phase of our SLO cycle. This year is our analysis and action year. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing how these numbers adjust for the 2022-2023 school year. And I'm thinking that we're going to make a jump really with some more intentional analysis and action related to SLOs. And so our culture of inquiry is still developing. We have department and college-wide professional development occurring. Folks are participating in our cultural curriculum audit. It's our flagship equity program at the institution. They're getting together and reading books like Grading for Equity to figure out how they can utilize even their grading practices to be more equitable. They're creating robust assessments so that they can obtain instructionally meaningful results. They're reviewing and modifying their curriculum, adopting OER, realizing, hey, in my department, for example, we're realizing that inferential comprehension, a department-wide PD day where we all shared about what we do to teach inferences, to gather best practices, and to really strengthen our efforts to teach inferential comprehension to our, to our students. We have developing, one of our departments developed themed office hours. They had a portfolio project, and they realized that at a certain point in the course, students were not only not completing a big assignment, but they were also dropping the course. And so they decided to develop themed office hours to address those specific assignments in a way to provide that just-in-time support so that their students would not only complete the assignment, but also persist in their course. And by virtue of those themed office hours, they found an increase in assessment scores, and they found an increase in course success as well. And they asked for their personal results of assessment, as I mentioned earlier, because they really wanted to know how their teaching aligned with what the rest of the data showed and what they could do personally to increase, to help their students to improve their learning and to close equity gaps in their own courses. And that is my presentation. So I'd like to, if I can, take some time to answer any questions that you have.
How do you guys do your ISLOs there? Is that a wrap up from aligned course level SLOs at the institution level, or?
It's twofold. It is aligned course level SLOs. So we have our departments, we have them conduct what we call a very narrow mapping. We ask them to select two SLOs, two course level SLOs in their department per institutional SLO. So we have 5 institutional SLOs. So each department could have a maximum of 5 or of 10 course level SLOs mapped. And so we wanted a very narrow mapping. And then faculty, then we adapted what we call, we adapted the value rubrics to match our ISLOs. And then faculty conducted a direct assessment. Faculty who were teaching students in those courses where the course SLOs were aligned, they conducted a direct ISLO assessment to score their students on using that rubric.
So it's not, so that's interesting, because and I don't know how meaningful this data would be, but we had all of our faculty prior to me taking over this role last year map every single course SLO to an ISLO. And I'm looking at, we're hiring for a director of institutional effectiveness right now, and I'm kind of pausing on wrapping up all of that data into Tableau dashboards, because dashboards are very new for our college.
Yes.
And we have years and years now worth of course SLOs on a dashboard, as well as all the mapped program SLOs. And I'm kind of pausing because we not only did we do the ISLOs, but the faculty went through the work of mapping all the course SLOs to GE SLOs. And at this point, we know there's a lot of colleges out there not doing GE SLOs. And I noticed that wasn't part of your presentation, and wondering if you guys strategically made a decision to not use GE SLOs, or they were never part of the equation when you became a coordinator.
When I became the coordinator, they weren't much talked about, but I think that how we did it, or when we asked faculty to conduct that narrow mapping, we used the course, we encouraged them to limit their mapping to the courses that were on the GE plans. So in a certain sense, it captured that GE general education information while also aligning with our institutional student learning outcomes. So the focus was more on the ISLOs, although the mapping came from the GE courses.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. I did see a question, so I'm trying to listen to the conversations and answer questions and go through the chat as well. But I did get a question about who helps to head this up. And so at my institution, we have what we call SLO facilitators. I'm the coordinator, and we have an SLO facilitator in each department that's kind of the liaison. I provide a lot of the training and the support, but they maybe work more directly with their faculty, although I have weekly SLO office hours open to all faculty, and I meet with many faculty one-on-one a lot of the time. But our SLO facilitators help to communicate things, to gather the analysis and action guides, and to get that information into the SLO workbooks, those kinds of things. So having that group of facilitators has been very, very helpful, because they know their faculty and they know how to reach them much better than I do as somebody who's not serving in their department. let's see. Those SLO facilitators are, it counts toward college service, and it's also paid a small stipend. And that funding has come from Guided Pathways. So when Guided Pathways funding ends, I'm not sure if the stipend will continue. Let's see. My analysis and action guide is, so the analysis and action guides are not available on the website, but I am going to make them available to all of those who attended this presentation. I'm going to send them to Susie, and she will get the slides that I used today and the analysis and action guides shared with you all. It's not meant to be a secret. It's just not openly accessible because it's an editable document, and we don't want all kinds of folks changing our documents. I will make those available, and let's see what else. What other questions? Okay, questions about initiating the work. How did we get this work started? Well, when I began the role, we had a coordinator just step down from the SLO coordinator position, and we had our accreditation site visit coming quickly. And so when it came to initiating the work, it was just, I had been serving as an SLO facilitator, and I had peppered my former coordinator with a lot of questions because I really wanted to understand the process and how it worked. And our former coordinator is brilliant. He did such a good job. He made so much progress. And so what I really wanted to do was build on that. And I think the main thing that I realized is that so many folks were struggling with not knowing where they were in the cycle and not knowing how to enter into the work. And so that's why we really simplified the SLO cycles and put everybody at the institution on the same page. And it does mean that in our analysis and action year, the workload is higher across the college. It just is. But everybody then knows what is expected of them. And in a department where you have 20 courses, you can divide the load, right? A few faculty member can work on a couple of courses, if 2 faculty member can work on a couple of the other courses, and so on and so forth, right? So we divide the analysis oftentimes into different faculty, and then bring our analyses together to make actions on as a department. And then, so we really had to simplify that. Again, the pandemic was that blessing in disguise as far as SLO work at our institution was concerned, because we just made the move to Canvas. And as a result of our move to Canvas and everybody knowing Canvas, folks just got on board. Folks also felt if you remember, I'm going to go back in my presentation here to the very beginning. You see where we were with our data here in 2018-19, which is the year before I took over as coordinator. In 2018-19, this is where we were, and we knew that we were going to be in big trouble with our accreditors if we didn't make some real shifts and changes. And so there was a commitment from the college, from our VPs to our deans, to our department heads, to our faculty, and folks just got on board. They realized where we were and what was coming. And then I would say, because it was less compliance based and they started to see the data in Tableau, Tableau was a game changer for us. It just visualized for them what work that they were doing. And as a result, they were able to ask all of these questions, right? And to really do this inquiry that lended itself to very intentional actions. And then I think as we're going on, our faculty are seeing, hey, our actions are moving the needle. There are some changes that are being made. Of course, not every action does. If we, as educators, knew what to do to help our students to learn and to persist, we would have done it already. So a lot of our work with SLOs is exploratory in nature. But they're willing to do the exploring, they're willing to do the inquiry because they're enjoying the conversations they're having. and they're seeing an impact in their classrooms and with their students. Thomas, you had another question?
Yeah, I did. I had one more. So you guys literally have separate Canvas shells. So were you involved at all with, like, do you just have a separate core shell created automatically through DataTel, or do you just have one that just stays there and the students get cross-listed from their related courses? Do you know anything about sort of like that back-end process?
That's a very good question. Our online learning and educational technology area helps to support that significantly. And while I do work with them and understand it when we're together, I probably would not speak on their behalf and misspeak. I do know that a new shell is created every semester, and that we do use support from PeopleSoft and our curriculum software to make sure our enrollments are accurate. But yes, every semester we have a new shell with the current students that are added to it. And that's because we don't want our data to be skewed, right? If our faculty make a change in their assessment, even if they changed one of the 5 quiz questions in that example in our Fire 2 course, right? Let's say they change one of those 5 questions and students take it and it's in the same shell, well, then that skews all of the data going back. So it has to be a separate shell each semester so that our data set is accurate every time. But if you would like more information related to any of this, please know I'm happy to be contacted to chat more with you. If you want to talk with our online learning and educational technology group or Office of Institutional Effectiveness, we can get the people in the room to have these conversations, because we feel very good about the progress we've made. We know that we have to make more, but we feel good about the progress we've made. And we just care about student learning, and we don't care what institution it's happening at. We want our students to be learning.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to answer the question. Sorry for your eyes, folks, but I'm going to show the data. I think that question came through the chat. Can I show you the progress? And as far as emails and so on and so forth, if you would please email me, it will make sure that I don't miss anyone. So yes, please email me, and I'm going to put my email in the chat here. Anything else I can answer or support? Thomas, you have a question again, or is that a legacy hand?
It's a legacy hand. Sorry, I meant to lower it. There we go.
No problem, no problem. Okay, folks, if I missed your question in the chat, please speak up, because I'm not doing a very good job.
Were you all only looking at gen ed classes, or did you have something similar for tech?
We have related to course, program, or institutions.
All 3.
Yeah, we have all of our tech courses, welding, for example, electrical, they all have SLO assessments as well. And those courses can be found in our dashboard. For our programs, most definitely, all of our programs have to pass through. Our tech courses, for the most part, are CTE courses, so they pass through a 2-year cycle. And that's, again, where assessment happens and work is focused on assessment in year 1. And then in year 2, assessment continues, but the focus is on analysis and action. And then institutionally, we do have an institutional student learning outcome that addresses entry into the workforce and CTE and things like that. So yeah, this is an institutional effort across the entire campus. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, very well.
Thanks. Anything else I can share? Questions or something else you'd like to see again?
Thank you so much for this, Tricia. I think this is the second time I've seen you. I think you were also presenting during the coaches, And I only hope in a couple of years I can be anywhere close to where you are. We've done a lot of work at our college and are excited because we just got our Tableau dashboards up. But your use of Canvas and the way you guys are doing it, I think it could potentially be a model for other colleges.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
We have a wonderful team. I can't tell you how helpful it is to have an Office of Institutional Effectiveness that's so invested and bought in and supportive, and the Offices of Online Learning and Educational Technology that help to make all of these pieces work together. We're just very, very, very fortunate. And then we, of course, have our SLO facilitators who do a wonderful job of taking the lead, and our faculty who have really risen to the occasion. They step up and they do the work. And is it perfect? No. But is it progress? And is there really a movement toward inquiry? Yes. And so anyway, I'm just very thankful to be at an institution that works like this for student learning outcomes, which has not always been the case.
Yeah, I'd like to just pick your brain a little bit on maybe not this session, but another day. I did send you an email on how you guys close the loop. We're at like 98% of our courses with reported results as of fall 2022.
Wonderful.
We actually only had 2 courses that didn't report for that semester, and we're on a new assessment cycle, but we're not really in the weeds on the assessment. With our faculty, it's have an assignment that you think measures your outcome, right? And then you tell us how many students that actually completed that assignment and how many of those students achieved. And so we're, and whether that met a target measure, because we don't have an institution set one. And that's been a pretty simple process to get us going, and so that we didn't get dinged on our accreditation. In fact, we just got off of all of our warnings, which we're very happy about because of this new process we've built. But this is where we need to get. So just thank you for your time, because I know this is just above and beyond everything else.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for taking the time to come and listen to me talk today.